Carol, this is a famous Ephraim McDowell house. I think it was built about 1804. Don't you think it would be nice to pay a nice visit here?
I'd love to see the inside of it.
Well, let's see if the lady is here. Let's knock on the door and see.
Oh, come in.
Oh, Alberta, so nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Mayor Sower. Won't you come in?
Thank you, and I want you to know my co-worker. This is Carolyn Schaefer.
Hello,
Hi there,
Carol.
Alberta. Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to see you.
We're
Just
so
come in.
excited about this visit today. It's a beautiful, beautiful home.
Let's go into the library. This is the house where Ephraim McDowell lived and where he performed this very first surgery, Christmas Day, 1809. The lady's name was Jane Todd Crawford. This part of the house was built in 1802 and 1804 after Dr. McDowell married Sarah Shelby, the governor's daughter. The picture here is Dr. McDowell. You will find him there. That was painted about 10 years before the doctor died by an artist who lived in Danville whose name was Patrick Henry Dunlap.
Is that right?
And the little boy, all of our children love the little boy over here, William. William is typical of the portraits of the time. Artists didn't get out in the wintertime, so they painted bodies. And then when summer and spring came, they would come to your house, bring the bodies, spread them on the floor. You'd choose a body, and they would put your face on it. William was only 11, but that's definitely a man's body that he chose there. And over on our back walls, we have portraits of kinfolks. William's father was killed in a duel when he was 24. And then the next young man married the doctor's oldest daughter. And these
What
two.
was her name?
Her name was Susanna.
Susanna, I see. Uh-huh.
And these are both brothers of Dr. McDowell, Joseph and William.
Now, isn't it true that William McDowell was the one that didn't like the sight of blood?
Son
Was it
William
Wallace?
son William Wallace didn't
Son-
like the sound.
Son William Wallace didn't like
didn't
the
like
sight.
blood.
So he wasn't going to be a doctor,
No,
was he?
no. He was going to be a farmer. Now, we'll go into the parlor. The pianoforte is here. The governor gave Mrs. McDowell a pianoforte for a wedding present. And you know, the Danville ladies gossiped even then. They said that was a frivolous gift. He should have given her something more practical. The doctor played the fiddle. He liked to entertain the folks who came to visit here. And he would quote Bobby Burns and Sir Walter Scott. The corner chair over there, soldiers could come in and sit down without having to unbuckle their swords and use the chair to save themselves time. More kinfolks, this niece of Dr. McDowell's lived in Lexington. She married the son of the man who started the city of Columbus, Ohio. And this is the governor's portrait here. That was given to granddaughter Susanna for a wedding present.
Oh, isn't that a nice picture of the governor, though?
And Letitia Shelby
Oh, yes.
married a Todd and moved to Shelbyville. So the family came
Charles
there.
Todd, married Charles Todd. And I think that the governor gave 500 acres, I believe, when they got married to Charles Todd and Letitia. Yes, and that's Letitia. Isn't that a nice
Letitia.
picture?
She's pretty, isn't
Oh,
she?
she's a beauty. She is a beauty.
And the lamps are the whale oil lamps that belonged to the governor.
Oh, they belong to
Yeah.
Isaac Shelby
Yes.
himself.
Now, legend goes with those. We don't know if it's true or not, but it is said that perhaps they were in the parlor of Traveler's Rest
Yeah.
when the doctor and Sarah were married.
Oh, I see.
Interesting.
The tea table set up for tea there. The tea caddy belonged to Mrs. McDowell. The coin silver spoons, the fire screen to protect the lady when she was sitting there in the wintertime with a big fire there, that would protect her makeup. Her face wouldn't get too hot.
What
Her
about
makeup had a wax base and it would have melted, run down on the collar of her
I
dress.
see.
They had to think of all those things,
Yes,
didn't
they did.
Now, I think maybe also you have a small picture of Sarah Shelby.
Yes. We have a miniature of
Miniature?
her in her
Uh-huh.
bedroom upstairs.
Good.
Her nickname was the Duchess.
The Duchess.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. And some people called her Sally.
Yes, the doctor always called her Sally.
Tell us a story over here. What is that beside this clock?
The story that goes with the clock says that as a clock was being brought over the mountains, bringing them into the Danville area, that Indians chased the wagon train and shot at them. Fortunately, no one was shot, but the clock still bears the mark today of an Indian arrowhead.
It's amazing. Clock keeps good time?
Yes, uh-huh.
Isn't that something? How old would you say that clock is?
Before 1830.
Before 1830.
Everything in the house is before 1830.
1830. Good. 160 some odd years old.
I wish that clock could talk.
Isn't this a beautiful bed here?
Yes.
And look at the ropes. That's
Yes.
what I was just eyeing.
All the
That's a
beds.
mattress.
Yes. The rope beds and the mattress is the feather bed.
Oh, I remember those now.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Just beautiful.
The trunk over here, first trunks were literally tree trunks.
Well,
Mighty Carter, what
I didn't
about-
realize that.
That
Tree
one's
trunk.
covered with buffalo hide, and that one belonged to Jefferson Davis.
Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederacy. Yes. I remember one time when I was here before, they said something about when ladies had long hair in those days, they put the hair over the back of a chair like that, and that was called a hair chair. Is that
A hair
correct?
chair, a comb back rocker.
Comb back rocker.
We call it the original hair dryer.
Oh.
One cute little boy here got down on the floor looking every place for the plug. He had to plug it in. The Indian basket cradle,
Yes.
it rocks and it rolls.
Rocks and rolls both. In other
Yes.
words, you can pick up one end of it,
Yes.
roll it along, couldn't you?
Yes,
Isn't that
right.
interesting?
George Washington was a very good friend of Dr. McDowell's father, Samuel.
Uh-huh. And he was a good friend of Isaac Shelby's father, Evan.
Yes.
Yes.
And the other reverse painting is Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson and Dr. McDowell were good friends.
Yes.
Now we're going down from the new part of the house, finished in 1804, until the old brick part of the house. And when we go through this little door, we have to be very careful because that is the ceiling.
Oh. It is low.
We're very proud of the furnishings in this room. The Colonial Dames, Chapter 9, furnished this room for McDowell House. And this is the room where the surgery took place. It was just another bedroom in the house, a traveler's room, but this is where Dr. McDowell brought Jane Todd Crawford that cold, snowy day that she came to McDowell House for the surgery.
Isn't it really something, Carolyn, that we are really in the spot where the first successful ovarian
Yes.
surgery
Was
was performed right here?
And without an anesthetic.
Yes.
Well, I tell you what, let's sit down and we'll have Doug talk to us. We'll talk to him, okay?
Okay, sounds good to me.
Okay, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the background of the family of Ephraim McDowell. You know, his father's name was Samuel McDowell, and he married a lady by the name of Mary McClung, I believe I'm correct. And they had 11 children, and Ephraim McDowell was child number 9. Can you imagine that? Of course, in the olden days, they had a lot of children. That was not unusual. But Ephraim McDowell, he went to school. He had a fair schooling here in Danville. He later went to school in Georgetown and down at Bardstown. And then he went over to Edinburgh in Scotland, and he studied for a couple of years under the noted surgeon there by the name, I believe his name was John Bell.
Yes.
Isn't that correct,
That's right.
Alberta?
Uh-huh.
And then he came back to the United States, of course, and he performed many surgeons. And then, of course, most important thing happened to him back in 1802, I believe it was. He married Governor Shelby's daughter, Sarah. And I think that some people called her Sally, but you called her another name.
Her nickname in town was the Duchess.
The Duchess. Well, that's a nice name. Well, she was Governor Shelby's, I believe it was the oldest daughter
Yes.
of Isaac Shelby. And he was a good bit older than Sarah. I believe that he was probably in the neighborhood of 13 years older, maybe,
Yes.
or in that neighborhood, older than Sarah was. And he studied, practiced for some time here in Frankfort, and finally, one day, as a matter of fact, before he even performed the first ovarian surgery, he had performed some cesarean operations and some tracheotomy operations, as I understand, probably just a little before the operation here. Do you think that's probably
That
about
is
right?
probably-
Yes. But the thing about it is, back in 1809, there was a lady that lived in Greene County, and her name was Jane Todd Crawford. And she was quite sick, and there were a couple of doctors down there, and that's 60 miles away, too, by the way. And there were a couple of doctors down there that said they thought that she was going to have twins, and she was having trouble. Her stomach was very much enlarged, and she had tremendous pain. So they asked Dr. Ephraim McDowell if he would come and visit her. And remember, this is in the dead of winter, but he went. And he went on horseback down into Greene County, 60 miles away, and he examined the lady very carefully. He felt all around her very enlarged stomach, and he couldn't feel the head of the baby or the feet or the buttocks or anything, and he finally, in further examination of other parts of her body, why he finally discovered, well, she was not going to have a baby, that she had a huge tumor. So in talking with Jane Todd Crawford, he told her that she was in very serious condition, that an ovarian operation had never been performed successfully before, and that he hated to tell her, but if something wasn't done, she's probably going to die. So the lady had great faith and confidence in Dr. Ephraim McDowell, and she also had a lot of faith in God, as I understand it. She placed her faith in not only in the doctor, but in the Lord. And he said, now, if you decide to have the operation, you'll have to come to Danville, Kentucky. Again, that's 60 miles away. And he finally left the house, and he rode on back here, of course, and when he got here, he really thought that probably she wasn't going to do it because she was very large, and to have have the lady travel by horseback for 60 miles in the condition that she was in might even be fatal, I guess, on the way. So when he got back here, he thought about it and thought, well, I don't know whether she's coming or not. Thought really that she probably wouldn't. So in a way, he was sort of surprised to see her in 3 or 4 days. She showed up here in Danville. He probably had made some preparation and thinking about the operation in case she did arrive. So when she did arrive here, why, she was in terrible condition, because think of a huge stomach with that all of that fluid and everything. that was in her, the tumor, and riding on a horseback over hills and snow and ice that was in those days, you know. And it took probably 2 or 3 days.
Took 3 days.
Took 3 days, did
Yes.
it, Arba? 3 days to get here. Think of riding 3 days in the condition that she was in. But she finally made it successfully here. When she arrived and he examined her, he discovered that her stomach, part of it was sort of black and blue, probably from the riding on the horse.
All bruised
See?
up.
Yes,
Bruised
up
up.
against the saddle.
Up against the saddle. So they had to wait for, I think, 5 or 6
Yes,
days,
5
maybe.
days.
5 days
Before they
before
could do the
they
surgery.
could do the surgery. So he asked her again if she was prepared to die, that this was really a sort of an experiment is the word that he used. He said, this is just going to be an experiment. But he said, if you're willing to try it, why, I will try it. So she said, yes, I'm ready. You know, Carolyn, this is the most unusual thing. The operation was performed on Christmas Day in 1809. And I have read where actually one reason that he wanted to do it on a Sunday, and this was a Sunday, he wanted to do it on a Sunday because he wanted all of the churches to pray for the success of the operation.
Oh,
Isn't that
very
interesting?
nice.
So when finally it came to the point where they were going to perform the operation, they had a pretty good sized plain flat table that they put Jane Crawford on. And they removed her clothing so that it wouldn't be in the way to perform the operation, because you can think how huge she must have been at that time. Now, there were several people that were present at that time. There was a gentleman or a doctor by the name of James McDowell, which was his nephew, that was there. There was another doctor by the name of Albin Goldsmith that was there. There was a nurse by the name of Baker that was present, and a fellow by the name of Thomas McKinney.
Charles McKinney.
Charles McKinney it was, that was present. And there probably, as I have read, there probably was 1 or 2 other people present, because in performing an operation like this without any anesthetic whatsoever, because ether was not invented at that time yet, neither was chloroform, so they did the operation without any kind of anesthetic at all.
Oh.
As I understand, they didn't even give her any bourbon whiskey or anything. So it was necessary that there be a person that would hold one arm, another person would hold another arm, another person would hold one leg, and another person would hold the other leg, because they, as I understand it, even if she tried not to twitch and scream and jump and so forth, you know, the pain must have been tremendous
It
to
would
her.
just be natural, I would think.
Yes.
Just
And he examined her very carefully, and finally he made a 9-inch incision sort of across her stomach. And when they opened her up, of course, why, it was really something, I guess, to see, because I believe I'm correct in that the intestines, part of the intestines sort of fell out on the table.
Oh, so much pressure from the tumor, I
Yes,
guess.
from the tumor. And also remember, my good friend, Carolyn Schaefer, there wasn't any running water, there wasn't any hot water, there wasn't any inside toilets, there wasn't any of the niceties of today.
It's a wonder infection hadn't set in.
Well, he was very careful about that, because he had what they call, he had some waxed strings or cords that he used to tie the different veins running into her tumor. So he did a lot of those things first before he started any of the cutting of the tumors. He finally cut away the tumor, and finally he couldn't get the whole tumor out all at once.
How
So
big was it?
he cut a little piece of it first and got some of the fluid from the tumor out, and then he removed one part that weighed 15 pounds, And then he cut away the second part, and it weighed 7.5 pounds. So the entire tumor weighed 22.5 pounds.
My goodness.
Isn't that
hard to imagine, isn't
Oh,
it?
it's hard to imagine. Just think of trying to lift up anything, 22.5 pounds, especially when it's secured just to a person like that. Well, he finally was able to get the tumor out. Then he did something that the doctors tell me was most important. He did have some warm water, and he washed the intestines very carefully because he didn't want peritonitis to set in, which would have been fatal, of course, at that time.
And they also thought if your intestine got cold or dry, you would die.
Is that right? I didn't know
Yes.
that part of it. Yes.
Interesting.
So that was the important part of wiping them off with warm water. Well, he finally got the tumor out, and then he started sewing her lady up. And the last thing he put in was the intestines to put them back in there, see?
Oh.
Yes, that was the last thing he put in. But he had these sewing up of the side there about every 2 inches. And then after he finished that and he put the intestines back in, he had adhesive plaster that he made about every 2 inches. And the reason for that was to hasten the healing of the incision. So when they performed it, why, of course, they put her back in bed, and he gave her instructions to be very careful about getting up or walking around or doing anything, because it's important that that incision was to heal as quickly as possible. Well, the story goes that he came back one day 5 days later, and he discovered that she was up making up her own bed
Oh, my goodness.
after 5 days. Well, he got after her a little bit about that, about getting back in bed and taking it a little easy, you know. And some people say, some of the books say this. They say, well, why was it that he waited 5 days to come back to see her? Well, the explanation for that, he probably came back every day. But it was only on the 5th day that he finally found her up
Right.
and walking around.
Right.
So she did stay here, I believe, Alberta, about 25 days, something like that. And then she was ready to go back home on horseback 60 miles away.
Goodness. Now, how old was she when the surgery was performed?
That's important. I'm glad you brought that up. She was 46 years old when he performed the operation, and he was 38 years old. And it's interesting to note that she lived a whole lot longer than he did. She lived about 32 years after the operation. Isn't that
Yes,
correct?
right. She was 78 when she died.
78 years old, and before she died. And you know, the poor old doctor, he died when he was 59, and of course he got all these pains in his stomach, and he started vomiting and carrying on, and he became real sick. And they didn't know at that time what the problem was, but I think that you know what the answer was.
They called it cramp colic, and doctors today reading about it say that it was appendicitis.
So really, probably appendicitis maybe burst, and he
Yes.
probably had peritonitis, and that was probably what killed him. Isn't that too bad? There's
It
a
is.
doctor that saved a lady that she was 46 years old. She lived until she was 78 years old. He gets sick of appendicitis, and he dies at 59.
A shame.
Yeah,
A
but-
loss, too. A great
Well,
loss.
he was a great physician. He performed, I think, about 9 or 10 ovarian surgeries after that. I think one thing that I would like to bring out is the fact that he evidently was a good friend of General Andrew Jackson down in Nashville. And Andrew Jackson had a real good friend by the name of Mrs. Overton. So Andrew Jackson got in touch with Dr. Ephraim McDowell here in Danville, and he asked him to come down there to see this lady. And this happened about 1922, I believe.
1822.
I'm sure. 1822. And so he did. He went down there, and they went to the Hermitage in Nashville, which was General Jackson's home. And they performed the surgery there, and I believe they removed a tumor that was, I believe it was about 16 pounds or thereabouts. And it was successful, but the important thing I thought was the fact that General Jackson actually assisted in that operation, and it was successful. Another little tidbit that I thought was important, and that is that there was a young man in Tennessee, his name was Richard K. Polk, I believe it was, or James K. Polk. James K. Polk. He was 17 years old, and he had a stone in his bladder, and he suffered and suffered and suffered something awful with it. I guess today we might even call it a kidney stone, what we would call it today, you know. So, and it's quite a painful thing. So McDowell said, well, you must come to Danville if you want me to try to see if I can remove it for you. So he did. He came to Danville. The operation was successful, and Polk went back to Tennessee with a stone in his pocket.
Oh.
And he later became the President of the United States.
Interesting.
I thought another interesting little tidbit about it is the fact, especially when Frankfort is concerned, is the fact that there was a lady out at the Forks of Elkhorn, and Forks of Elkhorn, Alberta is just a very few miles outside of the city limits of Frankfort. He performed an ovarian operation on Mrs. Bride at the Forks of Elkhorn, and it was successful, and she lived for many years after that operation.
And that was another large tumor, 16 pounds,
16 pounds, I believe that's correct. Yes, it wasn't quite as large as the one here that he removed of Jane Todd Crawford, but it was 16 pounds is a pretty good size. As I understand, some of these tumors can enlarge to 100 pounds. I've read in some of the books that that's an awful large.
Oh.
I think that you'd also be interested in Jane Todd Crawford, what happened to her.
Yes. Tell me what she ended up doing.
Well, Jane Todd Crutcher, she went on back to Greene County, and then she moved from here to there to here to there, and she ended up in a little town across the Ohio River called Graysville, Indiana. They finally discovered that that's where she was. And she lived there very happily, like I say, until she was 78 years old. And her husband, another thing, another little tidbit is that her husband, Thomas Crawford, he was out clearing some land one day, and he fell into a vacant cellar, and he was killed immediately. So she had a sort of a sad life in a way with the death of her husband. But
Did she have any children after that surgery?
No, not after the surgery.
They had to do a complete
Yes.
surgery besides removing the tumor.
Well, we don't know about that, but we know she didn't have any children after that.
I think she had 5 before.
Well, she had 4 that we're sure of. One son, Thomas, became the mayor of Louisville.
Is that right?
Wow.
The mayor of Louisville. Isn't that interesting? Thomas
Thomas Crawford.
became the mayor of Louisville. And I think also, tell us a little story about, did you tell me that Ephraim McDowell also had a brother that was a sheriff that lived across the street? Tell us that story.
Yes, his brother was the sheriff here, and so he would have taken care of any of the crowds that people want to have out here. There would have been some people out in the street maybe because he had asked for prayers by the church folks, and they might, as we might today, just linger on to see what happened over in Dr. McDowell's house. Probably a lot of things happened in Dr. McDowell's house that would have interested a small village of about 350 people at the time.
Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting, yeah.
Well, I tell you, I think that we certainly have enjoyed being here in this really historic room, so to speak. And also, maybe Alberta can just tell us a little bit about those things that are on that chest of drawers over there. It's a beautiful set of chest of drawers, by the way. Just a beautiful piece of furniture. Now, tell me about what are some of these things up here?
This is a kit that belonged to Dr. McDowell. There's some medicine in there. There's some rhubarb. They used rhubarb a lot for medicine at this time. There's some ipecac. They would have used that a whole lot. And here's some of those little blood-letting instruments that, you know, if you were sick, your blood was bad. And so they would bleed you for many things. These are patient feeders, no straws yet. So when you were sick, they would use those to feed you. The pretty little blue jars there would have contained different kinds of salves that Dr. McDowell would have used for his patients, and then some more of different kind of powders that he would have used.
Isn't that interesting? You know, I remember in reading some of the books I've read about Dr. McDowell is the fact that on the first operation there was no anesthetic whatsoever. But on the second one, as I understand, there were some cherries.
And bourbon?
That he put in some bourbon.
Made cherry bounce.
Cherry balance.
Yes.
Stirred it up real good, and that probably helped.
Yes.
If you had enough of it, you would know what was going on.
You would know
maybe.
about that, yes.
So that's what they used in the later
later
operations.
ones,
But Mrs.
Crawford
did not have anything at
He
all.
does not mention giving her anything at all. He said that she sang hymns and quoted the
Is that right?
Psalms during the surgery.
Is that so?
I admire her.
Oh, my
I cannot
goodness.
imagine. No anesthetic, nothing at all.
Right.
Well, now, I see some saddlebags over there. Did Dr. McDowell make house calls, I'm sure?
Yes, Dr. McDowell traveled extensively. We told about the Nashville story. He went up into Chillicothe, Ohio, and he would have been all over this Commonwealth of Kentucky at that time visiting people who were sick and who needed more important work than the grannies and the herb women and the people who doctored that way would have been able to do.
Isn't that interesting? Well, I certainly have enjoyed this visit with you, Alberta. You have been most kind to us, and you certainly have added a lot of little tidbits that we didn't know about in our little interview here. And, of course, I always enjoy working with my cohort, as you know.
Yes.
And we have one of the finest photographers that you'll find any place in central Kentucky. So we're going to bid you adieu for the moment at least, and we hope to see you again in the near future. And if you ever get to Frankfort, Kentucky, I'll give you a special historic tour.
All right, I would enjoy that.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Carolyn, here we are again. We're at the Governor's Circle.
Constitution Square. It's
Oh, isn't that great? This is where it all started.
beautiful. Right.
And, you know, this is a bronze statue, you know, that depicts United we stand, the seal, United we stand, divided we fall. This
Kentucky's motto.
Kentucky's motto.
Right.
And there are the two men embracing each other. And I think it is important for people to know that in this circle, there are bronze plaques for every governor of Kentucky. I have noticed there's 2 or 3, of course, on Shelby.
Oh, okay.
Shelby as a patriot, as a statesman, a soldier, as governor. There are several bronze plaques about Shelby, as it should be, of course.
Right, he deserves
But
them.
we have not left out any governor all the way from Shelby, even Governor Wilkinson, who has just
Stepped down.
stepped down.
Mm-hmm. Could we see some of those, you think?
Yes, let's go.
Okay.
What do you say?
Okay, I'd like that.
Carolyn, you know, this is one of Isaac Shelby, 1750, that's when he was born, in 1836. When he died, he was the first governor of Kentucky. He served twice, you know, 1792 to 1796, and then, of course, he was the 5th governor. Came back, you know, about the time of the War of 1812, and he served from 1812 to 1816. And one of his first acts as governor was to call for and help the design of the Great Seal of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And the figures depict a pioneer statesman in his statue that represents a version of that particular seal.
And some people seem to think that's Daniel Boone up there. Isn't that right?
No, that's not old Daniel.
We don't think that's true.
We don't think that's Daniel.
But it has been said before.
It has been said that Daniel, yes. Is
But
the
there's
one.
nothing to back that up.
No.
Okay, what do we have over here?
Well, I think this is very interesting, Carolyn, in that here's one of Isaac Shelby, again, the first governor of Kentucky. But it goes right along. Here's one now of James Garrett. He was the second governor of Kentucky, and he is the only one that succeeded himself for the second term. Now, there are a few governors that have served twice, like Shelby, but James Garrett is the only governor that has served 2 successive terms.
And they can't do that anymore.
They can't do that anymore. And then here's Christopher Greenup. He was extremely popular person. As a matter of fact, he was, I believe, the first representative that was elected to serve in Congress. And then when he ran for governor, he was so popular, if my memory serves me right, he had practically no opposition.
Oh.
Here's Charles Scott. We could spend the day, I guess, here, but Charles Scott is one of the oldest governors, I guess, to serve. He served from 1808 to 1812, and he was with George Washington at Valley Forge in the Revolutionary War, and he is buried at the cemetery in Frankfort, KY. And also, Christopher Greenup is buried at the Frankfort Cemetery. There's Isaac Shelby again, showing him as the 5th governor. Here's George Madison, that only served just a very short time, and he was followed by Gabriel Slaughter. Remember,
now that name's familiar. Okay.
Remember I told you that Gabriel Slaughter actually was the one that opposed Isaac Shelby the second time that Isaac Shelby ran for governor.
So Gabriel Slaughter finally got in there.
He finally, and that's a story by itself.
Was he a good governor?
There was a lot of controversy the way he became governor.
Oh, really?
But it's a long story.
We'll get that next time.
Next time.
Okay.
John Adair, he's another popular governor, and again, he is buried in the Frankfort Cemetery. Joseph Deshay.
Okay, now he's the one that helped get the monument erected in honor of Isaac Shelby, right?
Correct. That's correct. Fine governor. He was the 9th governor. And here is Thomas Metcalf, old Stonehammer again.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting story. You know, when Thomas Metcalf was elected governor as the 10th governor of Kentucky, Joseph, I don't know whether it's Deshay or Deshay, I've heard people pronounce it 2 different ways, but anyway, he refused to leave the governor's mansion for several days because he didn't want to be succeeded by a stonemason.
Oh my goodness. Bless you.
Yeah.
Bless you.
John Breathitt here, he was the 11th governor, and he was a relative of Governor Breathitt, who served not too long ago.
Ned Breathitt.
Ned Breathitt, and here's James T. Moorhead. And remember, there are two Moorheads. James Clark was the 13th. I always remember James Clark because he was the 13th governor. And here's Charles A. Whitcliffe, and again, Charles A. Whitcliffe, he was related, you know, to J.C.W. Beckham.
Okay. And moving over here.
Robert P. Letcher was what you would call a fellow that had a lot of humor. You know, he lived on the corner of Wapping and Washington Street in what is now the
Todd?
The woman's club.
Oh, okay, yes.
And he had a lot of humor to him. But he was followed by a fellow by the name of William Owsley, and he lived on the corner of Main and a little alley that runs along there across from the State Journal. You know, that little alleyway that runs down through there? Right on the corner there. You know where Morris has an auction shop there? Right on that corner is where Owsley lived in Frankfort. He didn't have the humor that Letcher had, and Owsley was more of a student. You know. Oh, John J. Crittenden. I better not get started on him. We'd be here all day.
17th governor.
I think that I've said this before, if it hadn't been for Henry Clay, John J. Crittenden would probably be the greatest statesman statesman that was ever produced by the state of Kentucky. But he lived about the same time as Clay. And, you know, he was 5 times United States Senator from Kentucky.
Oh.
He was twice United States Attorney General. He was governor of Kentucky. He had one son, you know, George, that graduated from West Point, and he was a major general in the Confederate forces. He had another son named Thomas Crittenden. He was a major general in the Union forces.
A prominent family.
They certainly were. And he was the author of the Crittenden Compromise. I think Doug talked about that to me coming over here. Here is John LaRue Helm. He only served a few months. He died. So Lazarus Powell was the 19th governor of Kentucky. And
Another Moorhead.
Here's another Moorhead. And then here's another story here, in that Briar McGoffin was the 21st governor of Kentucky, and I want you to notice the dates on there. He was elected and served in 1859, but along came the Civil War. And he was really almost a Confederate. He leaned toward the Confederacy. But the General Assembly was controlled by the Union forces. So McGoffin couldn't get anything through the legislature, you know. So he finally resigned.
After about 3 years?
After about 3 years, he resigned. And he was succeeded by James F. Robinson, who, as you can see, only served about a year. But the story here is that Briar McGoffin, Governor McGoffin, said, look, he told the General Assembly, I'll resign, but I don't care for the person that is the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate and McGoffin didn't get along at all. But he said, if you'll have the President of the Senate resign, and you will appoint James F. Robinson as the President of the Senate, then I'll resign and you appoint James F. Robinson as governor. That's what happened. The President of the Senate resigned. They elected Robinson as the President of the Senate, though, because they didn't have a lieutenant governor. He was the President of the Senate. So in doing so, immediately after Robinson became governor of Kentucky, why they re-elected the fellow that had been the President of the Senate. You see, the President of the Senate was the one that was to succeed the governor.
I see.
Thomas E. Bramlett, excuse me, John LaRue Helm, he didn't live very long. And this is
John
Stevenson. Here's one here. Leslie. Here's James B. McCreary. You know, he was the last one to live in the old governor's mansion and the first one to live in the new governor's mansion. And then here's Luke Blackburn, who was a great doctor, and he helped in, I believe it was a cholera epidemics, you know, and he was a great governor. I tell you, I think that we have done a pretty good job of going around, and I think that maybe we should go and take a little visit to the courthouse where they held the 10 constitutional conventions. And then I think we ought to go to 2 other places. I think we ought to go to Grayson's Tavern and also to see the post office. It's the original post office, and as I understand it, it's the oldest post office west of the Allegheny Mountains. Well, here we are in Constitutional Square, and we're at the post office. And it is the original post office that was built prior to 1792.
I wonder how much postage was back then.
I can remember when penny postal cards were just a penny.
Oh, well, I can remember when I could mail a letter for 5 cents, but it's gone up a little bit.
Yes, I believe it
But it's
has.
still a bargain.
It's a bargain. But it is the original post office that was built prior to 1792, and I believe the first mail came through, what is that date?
Mayor Sower, I believe the first mail was delivered on November 3rd, 1792.
So this is a very historic post office. So I tell you what we ought to do. I think we ought to go from here to the courthouse where they had the 10 conventions,
Oh,
okay?
I'd really like to see that.
Oh, I would too. Let's go there. You know, we're now at the courthouse. This is a replica of the original courthouse that was built in 1785. It served as a Supreme Court building for the District of Kentucky because, you know, at that time we were still part of Virginia. This is the site where they had the first 10 constitutional conventions of Kentucky.
A lot of history took place then in this building.
If this building could talk, you know, or the trees around here could talk. But, you know, Samuel McDowell, the father of Ephraim McDowell, served as the first chairman of the convention, and not only the first chairman, he served as chairman of all 10 constitutional conventions leading up to the constitutional convention that when we became a state.
And Isaac Shelby was at all 10 conventions as well.
Isaac Shelby attended each and every one. And of course he was also a friend of Ephraim McDowell. I think I probably failed to say that, you know, back in the War of 1812 up near Detroit, when Isaac Shelby went up there with his troops, what doctor do you think went along with him?
Dr. Ephraim McDowell, I bet.
That's right, that's right. And of course, Thomas Todd was also the first clerk, and he served as clerk of all 10 conventions. So this is a very historic site. Not the original building, but it is on the site of the original building. This is Grayson's Tavern, and it was built prior to 1800. And here they had what was known as the political club. The political club had 30 members. And those members met on every Saturday afternoon about 3:30 in the afternoon. And they discussed all the political problems of the day. And I'm sure they probably talked a lot about what's going on in Frankfurt and also in Washington, D.C., or maybe it was Virginia, Williamsburg, or Richmond. That's right.
How long did these meetings last?
Well, the meeting started on Saturday afternoon at 3:30, but they sometimes went as late as midnight.
Oh, my.
And it was they had a lot of rules, you know. Each person paid dues. If you were absent, you had to pay 3 shillings. And if you were late, you paid, I believe it was about 1.5 shillings that you had to pay. But they also had other rules, you know. No person was to get up and say anything as long as the president was standing on the floor. No member could debate more than twice on the same subject, you know, of the day.
Without permission.
Without permission of the president. That's another thing that I thought was most unique, and that was that the president was elected every meeting.
Every Saturday they had a different president.
You might have, you know, if the last president, you know, he didn't preside, you know, just the way the majority wanted him to.
I wonder how they felt about succession. 2 Saturdays in a row.
Yeah, it'd probably take more than that, wouldn't it?
Really?
But they had a lot of rules. They discussed a lot of things. And most of the times they met here. Occasionally they met up there in the courthouse. And I think on rare occasions they met up at Dr. Alvin Goldsmith's house.
And we're going to see that house too, aren't we?
We're going up there to see that house right now. What do you say?
Okay.
We're now at the Alvin Goldsmith house that was built about 1820. It's now the home of the Chamber of Commerce of Danville. But you know, Alvin Goldsmith was quite a distinguished man back there in the early days, and he was a pupil of Ephraim McDowell, and he also was an assistant in the operation on the ovarian tumor of Jane Todd Crawford. He helped right a little across the street, you know, is the Ephraim McDowell house.
Okay.
So he was a very important man back there in those days, and I'm sure that he gave a lot of assistance to Ephraim McDowell.
Right.
But this is an original house. This one here is built in 1820. They just have so many houses over here that are so important, you know, in Constitutional Square.
So many historical places. It's really worth a trip over here.
Oh, you should come.
Right.
These people over here have been so nice to us. They've been most hospitable.
Very
and
cordial. We've
very
enjoyed
cordial.
it.
And I've enjoyed working with you.
Well, thank you.
today.
I have too.
And I want to say this, too, and I don't want it cut out of the tape. We are fortunate in having a very fine gentleman that's been with us all day and been an excellent photographer. He's a professional actor. You know, we're lucky to obtain Doug Crowe.
Doug has done a good job
He's done
today.
an excellent job.
Right.
He started with ABC. He went from ABC to Channel 27, and then he got real smart.
He got lucky and joined Cable 10.
Right. Well, we've enjoyed. I hope that everybody that's listened in today, I hope that they have enjoyed the tapes too.
I hope they've had as much fun as what we've had.
We've had a lot of fun.
Right, right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.